I find getting new tech a bit stressful sometimes, especially when my own money is involved. Now, I do spend lots of time researching what to buy, and when I do finally pull the trigger, I do get a little bit antsy with knowing if I've made the right decision or not. And it was like it when I purchased my new monitor, the MSI 273 QP QD OLED, to replace one of my broken MAG 274 QRF QD panel. Unfortunately, one of my monitors has given up the ghost, and as you can see, I only have one left. Now, it is unfortunate because I actually really like these panels. They did cost around £400 at the time of purchasing them back in 2021, so they're roughly 4 years old now. I have been in touch with MSI. There's nothing they can do under warranty, but what went wrong? So I've got the faulty monitor plugged into my laptop right now. I will just show you very quickly what is happening if I get the laptop switched on and unlocked. You can see plugged in, it works initially, but then this left-hand side of the panel falls into darkness. Now, I believe it is something to do with the backlight itself. So I had two of them on my setup. It was great and it looked lovely in uniform. The new OLED panel cost me £400 at the time of making this video from Amazon. And yes, I did and ah about it for a while after I got it, worrying that I'd done the wrong thing. Even to the point of having to sit my girlfriend in front of my old monitor and my new monitor, asking if she could tell the difference in image quality. Now, she could and said I was being stupid. So why am I sitting here thinking I've done the wrong thing? Well, for starters, the new screen is actually 26.5 inches rather than 27 inches. The panels don't line up perfectly at the top and the bottom anymore. The new OLED panel, even though it does look nice and skinny, does have a smaller bottom bezel, and it sits lower on my monitor bracket, something that I know is going to bother me somewhat if I keep the same stretched out wallpaper across my PC. Secondly, it costs £400, and I could have gone for a slightly cheaper MPG 274 URF QD, though it did have a 75x75 VESA mounting, and I needed 100x100, so no go there either. Now, I could have also gone a lot cheaper and picked up something like the MAG 275 QF, but then I'd be losing way more features versus what I had there already. So did I do the right thing in the end with this MSI 273 QP QD OLED? Well, I thought I'd talk about it in this video because it's now being used as my daily driver, and well, I'm getting used to it. Trying to, at least. So my new monitor is a 27-inch OLED panel, but it's actually 26.5 inches with a 1440p resolution and a 240Hz refresh rate, which I can say quite confidently, coming from my older 165Hz panel, that it has been a welcome addition. It uses quantum dot technology, which equates to a much better, more vivid color reproduction, which again, I'm not complaining about at all with this upgrade. And this time around, I'm also trying to embrace HDR with its True Black 400 to really try and give that a proper test, because I have been quite quick in the past to dismiss HDR altogether. I haven't really done much to take advantage of it completely. Now, it's all right in what I have tried so far, but it hasn't really been a mind-blowing experience versus televisions anyway. The monitor does also have a peak 1000 nits mode, but between that and True Black 400, I'm sticking with the latter. Also, the peak 1000 mode turns web pages and windows super grey, and as this monitor is also being, from time to time, used for work, the peak 1000 nits brightness doesn't outweigh having to turn it on and off every time I want to play a game or then use the browser. You've also got adaptive sync mode, which works great with G-Sync from 48Hz upwards as well. Testing the monitor using my Datacolor Spider X gave me some very interesting results. In its sRGB mode, the monitor achieves a 98% sRGB gamut, 74% Adobe RGB, 74% P3, and 69% NTSC. It also threw back an average delta E of 0.73, which was very good, and a max of 4.57. However, switching over to its user mode, it gave me a 100% sRGB gamut, 96% Adobe RGB, 98% P3, and 93% NTSC. Its delta E was an average of 0.7 and a maximum of 1.45, so there was a much smaller window there, and overall, best performing mode on this panel. But my new monitor also comes with what's called premium color, and I wanted to give that a test as well. It gave me a 100% sRGB gamut, 96% Adobe RGB, and 98% P3. Though its average delta E skyrocketed to 3.13 with a maximum of 6.66, so not great there. And I must say, the reds did just look stupidly oversaturated in this mode. I stuck with the user image mode for the majority of my testing, and I'm still using the monitor in this mode today. At 100% brightness in SDR, the panel achieved a max brightness of 246 nits with a contrast ratio of 8,330:1, which was fantastic, and a white point of 6,700. Though dropping this down to 50% brightness dropped the contrast to 5,510:1 and a 6,600 white point. Color uniformity at 100% brightness was just absolutely on point, and dropping it down to 50% brightness only yielded better results. Same with the luminance uniformity of the monitor, it's wonderful, top marks there. Testing the response time of the panel using my OSRTT tool, the panel at 240Hz gave me an average initial time of 0.76 with a 100% in window. It also pretty much gave me 0 RGB overshoot as my average error stuck at 1.43. Dropping this down to 120Hz, it spent again 100% in window with an average initial time of 0.8 and an average error of 1.5 for its RGB overshoot. And at 60Hz, it's exactly the same really, with nothing of concern. Okay, so maybe I am overthinking the panels not lining up on my desk. Maybe this is a worthy upgrade after all. The UFO ghosting test 2 gave me pretty perfect results at 240Hz with 0 ghosting appearing, as well as dropping this down to 120Hz. Both tests delivered exceptional results, and it translated well into games because I have been blown away with the games I have played already. And I will say now that testing games, I have been experimenting a lot with the HDR functionality inside of the games themselves, and some of them work really, really well. Battlefield 6, for example, works superbly in certain conditions. So to show you a snippet of what I actually mean, I've jumped into the Blackwell fields, and you can see looking straight into the sun that the exposure is intense. Now, if I look somewhere else on the game, or on the level, the map, it looks absolutely fine, really playable, really, really nice, but you do have this overexposure in the distance coming from the sunset or the sunrise there. So that is an issue with, I believe, the game's implementation of HDR as opposed to the monitor. I'm playing on True Black 400 mode, and there's nothing I can do. If I jumped into the options and down to the graphic settings, all the way to the bottom and go to HDR calibration, I've got it set to 40, but I keep dropping that down a little bit further just to try and knock a bit out of that exposure of the sunset, but it's not making a massive difference at all. And if I went the other way as well, it makes no difference. Now I know on the graphic settings, jumping back into the options to, where are we, graphics, down to the calibration, and it says set the slider to the lowest value where the two rectangles still look identical, which is basically 0. If I save the HDR there, everything is super, super dark, and it just doesn't look great. So going back into graphics again, into HDR calibration, where I had it around the 40s, everything is starting to look quite nice, especially if I'm not looking at that sunset in the distance. Then jumping onto the Siege of Cairo map, of course it's very, very bright, or it is to my eye here, but if we pop round to the area I thought looked really, really cool. It's the difference between the shaded areas and the dark areas. Sorry, the shaded areas and the light areas. Just looks really, really great and really immersive. So in these arches, for example, it just looks wonderful. Very, very, almost photorealistic, which is really cool. I had a battle on one of the games within this area, fighting through the streets here. And just the difference between the shadowy areas and the light areas is really, really nice. But again, diving back into the options menu, going into the graphics and then running down to the HDR calibration,
if the rectangles still look identical at 95, maybe down to 75, unless you have got some fringing down this side here, and we save that as a HDR setting. The bright areas just look incredibly bright, almost too overexposed. So the HDR implementation here is a difficult one. You really do have to, let's go down to HDR. You really have to get that correct.
And I know that if you want to maximize your FPS in multiplayer games, then you're not going to be playing at super high graphic settings anyway, but you're missing out. You really are. And other games didn't disappoint either. Hollow Knight, The Outer Worlds 2, and even some Anno 117 all performed splendidly and gave me some really nice image quality, and it's definitely an upgrade from my previous IPS display I spoke about at the start of the review. Ori and the Will of the Wisps was super bright, and even I had to turn down the HDR brightness setting to suit, as things did start to look a little bit overexposed. Now, I do think with HDR images, I've got to get used to the change in contrast between dark and light areas versus what I had before, because it is a far cry from how my IPS panel performed when playing the same games. Overwatch, again, I was absolutely stunned with how that looked. Being part of the MAG series, it's basic when it comes to ports. You've only got a single DisplayPort 1.4 and two HDMI 2.1 inputs and a headphone jack. Now, unfortunately, it's missing USB Type-C and a USB hub, which personally hasn't really been too much of a change from what I was using, but do be aware that if you wanted this on your monitor, you're going to have to start looking at the NPG series, which is basically the mid-range premium series of MSI monitors, and do come with a bigger price tag, though chances are you'll also be getting things like a 4K image as opposed to just 1440p. The stand that come with the panel also has some tilt, swivel and rotation functionality, but as I mentioned, I've got mine on the monitor bracket on the wall, so I've not used the stand at all with my current setup. But the big question is and still remains, am I going to be keeping it for the foreseeable future? At this time, absolutely.
Hold that thought, because as you can see behind me, I am missing a monitor because I wasn't 100% happy with the OLED panel that I was using. It was a great monitor, don't get me wrong. The image quality was absolutely stellar when playing games, especially on HDR. The contrasts were really, really nice. Super inky black, super bright areas as well, really cool. But I did have my concerns, and the size being one of them, the 26.5 OLED panel versus my 27-inch IPS panel, I didn't like the difference. Secondly, the burn-in. I thought that monitor being on for, I don't know, up to 15 hours a day if I'm working from home, I just got a little bit worried that it would start burning in. And yes, I know that there is a 3-year warranty with the panel, which does protect you from burn-in. What happens after that 3 years, right? The IPS panel I have on my system at the moment is 4 years old, so there's no more warranty on that, and that is why I replaced the broken one in the first place, because there's no warranty left. I didn't want to be in the same situation in 3+ years time where burn-in occurs because I've left it on a static image because I've been working at home for 10 to 15 hours and also gaming in the evening and something gets burnt in. Yes, there's OLED protection and things like that, but it was just not worth the risk. So I did, unfortunately, send it back, which isn't the conclusion I really wanted for this video. I wanted it to be a lot more positive when it came to the OLED panel because I had spent my own money on it, but maybe that is the reason why it has turned out the way it has with me sending it back, is because £400 is a lot of money for me anyway, not necessarily within the OLED market. £400 is a lot of money to then spend it on a monitor that might get a problem in 3 years' time. So I went back to the drawing board. I have selected a new monitor. I'm not going to say what it is yet, but I am going to be doing a video on it. So please stay tuned for that. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you want to keep up with our latest monitor reviews, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one.